Do not take the contents of this video as an endorsement of the BBC in its current state. The news arm of the BBC continues to defend its recent history of anti-trans articles, ignoring the damage to the trans community it is facilitating. In a pinned comment below, you'll find links to my original video on the issue, 2 follow-up videos from the YouTuber Sean, and a recent protest speech from Laura Kate Dale. Thank you. Now on with the video.
Well, this was always going to happen eventually. Yeah, I've been putting it off for long enough. It's time for me to start redoing some of my Doctor Who rankings, which I've been putting off for literally years now. I have not done a Doctor Who ranking video since the start of Jodie Whittaker's tenure as the Doctor. And as it is now drawing to a close, and I do not expect the last few specials to move the needle in terms of my overall assessment of the various aspects of that era, I think it's time for me to start revisiting these. Now, arbitrarily, I'm starting with ranking the series. I think probably just because we just wrapped one up, so hey, why not? And yes, I will, over the course of this year, no promise on exactly when, but over the course of this year, I do plan to redo my rankings of Companions, the Master, and the Doctor. So you can look forward to those down the line. But this was where I wanted to start. Now, as you may have guessed, as I've alluded, I have done this before. You can check the previous ranking if you want. I haven't, so I don't actually know how much things have changed. I suspect more than a little bit. This isn't going to be a case of me simply slotting in the 3 series from Jodie Whittaker's era into the pre-existing list and not moving anything else. My assessment and opinions on things change over time. I don't really care if it's inconsistent with what I said before. This is what it is now. Now, the other last thing to note before we get started, there are going to be 14 entries on this because while we have had properly 13 series 1 through 12, and then Flux, I am also counting the David Tennant specials, so that is the Next Doctor through the End of Time Part 2, as their own thing that I'm going to be ranking. I don't really count the specials in any other case than this because, well, partially because I don't know what series to lump them in with part of the time. Well, I do, but it's inconsistent. What I mean by that is the Christmas Invasion really feels like it's a prequel to Series 2, so I want to lump it in with that, but then you have things like Twice Upon a Time at the end of Series 10, which is a coda to that, so it lumps into the one that came before as opposed to the one coming after. It's super inconsistent. I generally don't deal with the specials except for the David Tennant specials, the run I just described. That really kind of is its own thing. That is, for all intents and purposes, at least as far as I'm concerned, a series unto itself. So that's what we're ranking. Let's get started with something that is probably going to go down badly with a lot of folks right off the bat. Number 14, Flux. Yeah, I know. Look, I actually agonized over this a bit because while I did not like Flux, I also don't want to feel like I am slamming it unnecessarily. I can be prisoner of the moment, either taking something that is fresh in my mind and thinking of it more highly than I might with time having passed, or thinking on it more harshly than I might later on down the line. And so I really kind of agonized over this. And I'll grant the distance between this and the next one on the list is not that great. It's closer than people might be thinking. But ultimately, I did have to put this one at the bottom because, and I think this is something that folks can agree with me on, since it is a serialized story, and while there are many plot threads, it is ultimately telling one story over its 6 episodes. If that one story doesn't work for you, that sinks the entire thing. So if you liked the one narrative being told over these 6 episodes, you are going to rank this a heck of a lot higher than I am. But if you're like me and you didn't like it, it drags the entire thing down. Unlike every other series where the occasional bad story or just episode that didn't click with me is balanced out by other stuff that did, every single part of this feeds into this same story that I don't like and didn't work for me. So because of that, I can't put it any higher because it's telling one story, and it's one story that I didn't like. If you liked it, you'd rank it much higher. Get it, totally. I am freely admitting that whether or not you like that core central story, that is super subjective. You liking it, not liking it, you're not wrong either way. But at least grant me that your liking of that single continuous story is basically what determines the entire thing when it comes to placing this. If you can agree with me on that, then I think we can move on. Number 13, Series 7. Series 7 has always been kind of a rough one, and even when I went back and revisited it, it still is. There's a couple of episodes that I like, and there are honestly some that I seem to like a heck of a lot more than other people. I like Asylum of the Daleks, so sue me. But when looking at it as a whole, as opposed to just comparing what episodes are good, what episodes are bad, I mean, I do that as well. That is a factor in this. But when I'm trying to take it as a whole, like what is the experience of rewatching this series, the mid-season break did not do this thing any favors at all. I mean, it wraps up Amy and Rory's story decently enough, but it means that Clara's entire introduction is completely negatively impacted by this. And I know some people love Clara, and I have come to think better on Clara overall than I used to, but this first series, she's not a character. She's a MacGuffin. She's a walking plot device, and she is not well characterized at all. The two versions of her we got prior to this, the ones that effectively don't count, are better characterized than she is over the entire half of the second half of this thing. But even if I am going to cop to the fact that the first half of Series 7 is better than the second half of Series 7, I still have to look at them as a continuous piece, and your second half's weaker than your first, and the transition between the two is rough and clunky. So... And yes, I know some people will probably defend it as, well, you need to treat it like two different things since it is two different stories. Look, it's lumped as Series 7. You buy it as a box set. It's sold as a single series. That's how I'm judging it. Deal with it. Number 12, Series 11. Jodie Whittaker's debut series. Now, I was tempted to put off doing this list for a little longer because I am planning to start revisiting Series 11 and 12 in the not-so-distant future, so it's possible my assessment on this might change, but I still feel comfortable putting this about here because there's certainly things about Series... Well, there's a couple of episodes that I genuinely like quite a bit. There's a couple of episodes that I have issues with but still think were well executed. But there are also a couple of big decisions made about Series 11 that I think were good choices, or at least interesting choices, even if they didn't pan out the way I would have liked. So to compare it with, say, Series 7, which we just talked about, I look at the basics of what Series 7 is, which is two half stories unconnected, and introducing a whole new character is going to drive a whole bunch of the plot and not have time to properly characterize them. And already before I even watch it, I'm going, I don't think this is going to be good. I look on paper at what Series 11 is doing, which is a bunch of self-contained stories, not relying a ton on reintroducing old stuff and giving us time with these adventures to have them be their own thing wrapped up. There isn't really an overarching narrative. Yes, the villain at the very end is the same one as the villain in the beginning, but they're not doing the mystery box thing across it, which is something I've been very, very sick of. And on paper, I'm in favor of all these. It still didn't quite come together as I would have liked, but it's still got some standout episodes, in my opinion. The highlight in particular being It Takes You Away, which I will still defend. I know lots of people don't like it. I like it quite a bit. And overall, even the episodes that I don't like, there's really only one that actively ticks me off. That's Arachnids in the UK, for the record. And the rest, they don't annoy me that much. So the ideas being interesting enough, the sort of fun of having a new Doctor, and the episodes that I do think are better, do bring this up just above Series 7. Before we move any further, this is where I'm going to pause and say, that's basically the series where I'm like, these aren't especially good, and I'm not particularly looking forward to revisiting anytime soon. So as we move on from here, we are into series that, yes, I'm going to be issuing criticisms of to justify a lower placement on the list, but I do like. So the three we just did, those are really the only ones that I would say are, they're kind of bad. And from here on out, I'm going to be like, look, they're good, but... Okay, so little perspective shift as we move on to number 11, Series 2. I think Tennant nostalgia clogs a lot of people's brains on this. Series 2 is rough. It's not all bad. And there's some great stuff in it. I still love The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit two-parter. There's some other episodes that I really, really enjoy in this. And even ones that I don't think are that great still have moments I love. Things like Tooth and Claw give me things like that. The finale is terrifically emotionally focused. But when this one's bad, it's real bad. And I know most people are going to cite Love and Monsters on that. But Love and Monsters is not even the worst offender to me. Fear Her is a worse story in terms of execution. And The Idiot's Lantern, I have a hard time thinking any episode of Doctor Who will ever take its place as I think the worst thing the revived series has ever done, because it is freaking harmful in addition to just being bad. I've ranted about this before if you need that. I don't want to go off on it again. But yeah. This thing is a case of there's definitely good stuff, great stuff even in this, but the stuff that's bad is really dragging it down. Number 10, the David Tennant specials. Now, almost kind of inverse to Series 2, unlike that one where it was a case of there's great stuff, but other stuff dragging it down, this is a case where most of it kind of lands middling for me. The stuff that is weaker, like the Planet of the Dead and aspects of The Next Doctor, isn't terrible, and I'm still okay to watch it. It's not something that I deliberately skip during a rewatch or would be tempted to, but at the same time, the stuff that is better and is good, like The End of Time Parts 1 and 2, I enjoy, but I don't think is great. And I know everybody loves Waters of Mars more than I do, and look, it's good. I appreciate it, but I don't love it. And that's basically it. That's the reason for the placement of the specials here. There's no story in this that I love. Pretty much every other series has at least one story that I love. Even Series 11 gave me that. But this one, yeah. The only reason it's higher than Series 2 is there isn't really anything I hate either. So, yeah, there we go. Number 9. Series 12. Yes, this is going to be the highest ranked of the Jodie Whittaker series on this particular list. And I thought Series 12 was stronger than Series 11 pretty much across the board. The characters, for the most part, felt like they were working better, although in many cases still not as well as I would have liked. But we got an introduction to this new master. I like Sacha Dhawan in the part a lot. It gave me at least one episode that I deeply adore, which is Can You Hear Me? It had some other really strong entries like The Haunting of Villa Diodati. Even its more disposable stories like the Nikola Tesla one are still fun and enjoyable, and I would have been happy to put this higher except finale, Timeless Children. Man, do I hate that. Not only do I think it's a bad idea, but it's delivered so narratively poorly. They basically pull the Doctor out of the story going on, dump a ton of exposition on her that does not actually impact the immediate proceedings going on, remove her from the exposition machine, quickly wrap up the plot, and then that's it. It's not just an idea I can't stand. It is such a terrible way to deliver it. This is right up there with The Architect at the end of The Matrix Reloaded. Like, I'm not sure there are too many worse ways you could have thought of to convey these ideas. And yeah, that alone pulls it down quite a few spaces from where this series might otherwise have landed. I try not to hold the single worst episode in a series against it, but when it's the finale and when it was the thing everything was building to, yeah, it's gonna drag it down. Number 8, fittingly enough, is Series 8, the first series of Peter Capaldi's run as the Doctor. I have more appreciation of this now, but a lot of that comes in hindsight, because a lot of what I like about this at this point has to do with how much I have come to love and deeply adore the arc of Capaldi's 12th Doctor. Again, I'll reference you a video for like why it matters so much to me, the journey that he goes through over series 8, 9, and 10. And knowing where he's going to end up makes me much more appreciative of where he started. It's kind of like how, yeah, in A New Hope, Luke Skywalker is kind of whiny.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
But if he didn't start that way, him ending up where he does by the end of Return of the Jedi wouldn't have the weight.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
So when you can end a character's journey well, then yeah, it's okay if they didn't quite click for you at first. And he didn't quite click for me at first. Despite that, there are still some very good episodes in here. There's Mummy on the Orient Express, which is terrific. We get the introduction of Missy, who I love. And I'll say this flat out, and I will stand by it. Clara has way better performance chemistry with Capaldi than she did with Smith. It wasn't the worst with the 11th Doctor, but she clicks with Capaldi's Doctor so much better. And it makes me like Clara more. So yeah, Series 8, it's a decent one all around. Number 7, Series 3. I think people feel I'm a bit harsh on this one, but look, even on revisits and accepting that there are definitely things that are good here and some individual episodes and stories that are phenomenal. I mean, Blink, Utopia, Human Nature, and The Family of Blood, amazing stuff. And I also love Martha, but I kind of love Martha in spite of this series than because of it, because I feel like, granted, it's part of the narrative that the Doctor doesn't fully appreciate her properly, but I can't help but feel like the show itself doesn't really have a full appreciation of what it had with Martha, as is partly evidenced by how quickly she fell for him. I mean, I don't like that plot line in the first place, but how quickly they saddled her with that, not a big fan at all. It also doesn't help that while I have softened on John Sims' Master, because the 3 times we see him are wildly different, this is the iteration I like the least between this and End of Time and then Series 12. So that doesn't help either, but still good stuff. Still some strong stuff. Like I said, I do like these. Number 6, Series 6. This is one that lost steam as it went along, unfortunately, because a lot of the two-parters and even the start of an overarching story are really solid here. I love the concept of the silence. I think it's one of the coolest, creepiest things that modern Doctor Who has given us. I know most people would give that to the Weeping Angels. I actually find the silence creepier, personally, at least in their introduction when first brought in here. But we've got other amazing two-parters as well, with things like The Rebel Flesh and The Almost People. And then there's stories like The Girl Who Waited. So much good stuff in this. The finale's a mess. But unlike, say, Series 12, the finale doesn't tick me off. It just frustrates me, because it's got even some neat ideas, but it is a jumbled mess that doesn't know what to do with all the things it's juggling, and it feels like a very limp payoff to huge swaths of not only this series story, but River Song's story overall. So that is largely what is bringing this one down. As I said, not dragging things down quite as badly as The Timeless Child did for Series 12, but it does hold it back a bit. Finishing weekly is never going to work in a series' favor. Number 5, Series 9. Yeah, believe it or not, as much as I hate Hellbent, it's not dragging this series down as much as it might have otherwise. Because, yeah, I do hate Hellbent. I really do. I freely admit that I don't get it. I must not get it. I don't understand what it's doing, because if it's doing what I think it's doing, none of that is stuff that it should be doing. None of that makes any sense as a thing that you would want to do. So I must not get it. But I've revisited the thing multiple times. People have explained to me why they like it, and I'm not negating any of those arguments. I still really hate it. So I just gotta pretend that this ends at Heaven Sent and move on. Now, am I being gentler on a really bad final episode in a series because it's my favorite Doctor? Yeah, possibly. I have to acknowledge that's certainly an option. But I really do think that pretty much all the rest of this is really strong, or at least was interesting if didn't quite nail it. The two-parter with Ishildr, it could have been more than it was, but even that one, I don't think is bad. But then we've got these other stories that are just really good, strong stuff. There are specific hiccups along the way with things like The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar, but it's so much fun watching these characters, watching Capaldi, watching Missy, and having the chemistry between them, watching them interact. And then we've got really well thought out two-parters like Under the Lake and Before the Flood. And Face the Raven is really good, and Heaven Sent, I think that's the big difference between this and, say, Series 6 or Series 12, where the finales were dragging them down a bit. Because here, there is an episode that is as good as Hellbent is bad. It is being counterbalanced by something of quality actually higher than the issues I have with Hellbent. And that, yeah, that helps balance the books. Number 4, Series 1. My appreciation of Series 1 has gone up quite a bit over the years. I've been harsher on it in the past, largely because of aspects that the show's moved on from since then. There's a lot of the more camp aspects of Doctor Who, which, again, were legit to try out. Classic Doctor Who could be pretty camp at times, but never went down right for me. Things like the trash can devouring Mickey or the Slitheen. And there's a couple of floundering episodes like The Long Game, and I think Father's Day is possibly one of the most overrated episodes in the entire history of modern era Doctor Who. But Christopher Eccleston is so good in this. He carries this so much. And again, am I biasing it in his favor because I don't have another series from him to be able to award above this one? Possibly. But he really is that good. I fell in love with his Doctor immediately, within seconds of him being on screen.
Nice to meet you, Rose. Run for your life.
That does not always happen. My favorite Doctor is Capaldi. I didn't love him for over a full series. But Eccleston captures this sense of fun and adventure covering a layer of very deep, very recent hurt. And he brings that across so masterfully. And also, I'll be honest, I like the dynamic between Rose and the Doctor better here than I did with Tennant. So there's that as well. But again, this is also a case of the episodes that are good are some of the best in the entire series. The two-parter of The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances.
Just this once. Everybody lives.
It goes back and forth with a couple of others as possibly being my single favorite of the entirety of modern era Doctor Who. It's that good. And a lot of the rest of the series is also incredibly good. I still am probably a bit harsher on it than some people, but I have to acknowledge, if I can't praise Eccleston anywhere else, then this deserves a slot right where I put it. Number 3, Series 5. This was the first of Matt Smith's series, and I would say also, by a considerable margin, his strongest. Now, still some things that I'm iffy on. The Cracks in Time is not a overarching story that I particularly love. It's fine. It works well enough. I actually don't like The Big Bang as a finale, but it functions. I don't dislike it because what it's doing makes no sense to me, or I think it's damaging, or it couldn't possibly have ever worked. I just am bored by it. It feels like an exercise in narrative not tying than anything else. But all that said, Matt Smith nailed this character immediately. I got him as the Doctor right off. He came fully formed. There are some Doctors, and this isn't a complaint about some Doctors. Oftentimes, watching them find themselves and become who they're going to be over the course of a story, again, Capaldi, he's my favorite, that can be incredibly rewarding. But there is something about a version of the Doctor who shows up and within seconds into a newer generation is fully formed, and this is who you're going to be on this journey with for the remainder of his tenure. And that's what you get with Matt Smith. Right out of the gate, this is who we got, and I love him. I love him a lot. And while I may not feel the finale is as strong as other people think, the first part of that finale, the Pandorica opens, that's a great setup, great tension, love it. The Angel two-parter works really solid. The opening episode, the 11th hour, is probably the strongest start of a modern era of Doctor Who, period. We've got Amy's Choice, and we've got Vincent and the Doctor, which is just beautiful. This is a really good piece of work. Now we're about to get to the top two, and I got to tell you, the difference between these is a hair's breadth. It's so close. But let's start with number 2, Series 4. Tennant's best, both in terms of his performance, the overall quality of the stories that he's in, and paired with his best companion, Donna Noble. I do like Tennant, despite popular belief. I don't like him nearly as much as a lot of the fandom does, but I do like him. But I love Donna. Donna steals my heart and then breaks it by the end every time. She is everything I want in a companion. She is not romantically entangled with him. She is his best friend. She will push back on him for being an idiot. She's here to have fun, and they do. Like, so often it feels like lately there is the supposed pitch that the Doctor and the companions are doing these things to have fun, but you frequently lose the sense that they actually are having fun whenever they're on any of these adventures. It's like assumed that the fun happens in between the episodes we see. These two have fun while they are together. Yes, things get dire at points, including some episodes that I think are deeply underappreciated, like Fires of Pompeii. But these two know how to have fun around and with each other. And this has got a bit of an indulgent finale, but I think a really strong one. And as I said, a bit of a heartbreaking one as well. It's also got another one of my favorite two-parters with Silence in the Library and The Forest of the Dead. And it's also a fantastic introduction to River Song. Whatever you think about what happened with her later, her intro is stellar. And there are some weak moments in this. I don't like the Doctor's daughter very much at all. And the Sontaran two-parter is basically just fine. But there's also Turn Left, which is an episode I have come to appreciate a lot more in the years since it first aired. And Midnight, holy crap. Between having some stellar episodes and consistently one of my favorite Doctor companion pairings, this one's hard to top, but there is one I'm going to place over it. Number 1, Series 10. This is my favorite Doctor, my favorite performance from him during this series. This is where the Doctor's journey landed right where I needed him to be. The journey he goes on in terms of the characterization from Series 8 to Series 9 to here, for me, is a journey of finding the exact sweet spot for the character. And for me, it does feel like a journey. And it doesn't feel like, well, they were inconsistent and they didn't nail the character until the last one. No, it feels like he went on a journey. And it's a journey that makes sense to me, and it lands him right where I want him. The companions are fantastic. Bill is great. Nardole is perfectly utilized after being annoying in the stories where he was initially introduced during some specials. Here, he's really well used. There are phenomenal individual episodes in this. It starts really strong with the pilot. Thin Ice is severely underappreciated. Oxygen is terrific. Extremis is really smartly done. We get Missy back, and like Missy and Capaldi, I will never tire of. But as much as there is a lot of good in this series already, the finale, and the final episode specifically, World Enough in Time is one of the best dark episodes of Doctor Who, and The Doctor Falls, to me, serves as the summation and the essence of everything I love about not only Peter Capaldi's Doctor in specific, but the Doctor in general. Him saying why he does what he does to the Master and to Missy is what I will always hold up as the purest essence of what the Doctor is.
I do what I do because it's right. Because it's decent. And above all, it's kind.
And for that to cap off this series, a series that I already loved, I have to put it at number 1. It's my favorite Doctor in the best stories that he got, at the peak of his characterization, having truly earned becoming who he is, and then his fear at losing that.
I don't want to change again. Never again. I can't keep on being somebody else.
But being willing to sacrifice it regardless, because it's kind.
It's just that. Just kind.
That to me is the best of Doctor Who. And that's why for me, Series 10 gets the number 1 spot. What's your ranking? How badly do you disagree with mine? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. As a Patreon, you want to support what I do and keep this entire operation up and running. This is my living at this point, so any assistance is greatly appreciated. There's also a link there in the description, plus links to Twitch channel, Instagram, Twitter, my P.O. Box address, etc., etc., etc. It's all down there. Check it out. But don't worry too much about it. Because at the end of the day, my friends, you are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Thanks for sticking around into the credits. None of this would have been possible without my Patreon supporters in particular. I want to thank Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Bookworm. Thanks for keeping this going. And to everybody,